Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Translation Manchester monthly seminar series. My name is Alessandro. Some of you might already know me. I am Translation Research Manager at the university, and I manage Translation Manchester. We're back after a short summer break, and before we start, I would like to introduce Fiona, who has just joined the Translation Manchester team a couple of weeks ago as Translation Research Manager. Welcome, Fiona. Would you like to say hi to the people today?
Yeah, hi, and yeah, I look forward to working with you all, and yeah, please be in contact.
Good, thank you, Fiona. So as you know, this series has been designed to feature the partners of the Translation Manchester Research Network. We started it in February, it's been quite successful. And the idea is that we bring together this network of over 60 facilities and institutions around the university. Some of them are within the university, some of them are outside. But the idea is that all these facilities are supporting translational research. So you can find all the details on the partner in a booklet that we put together, and it's been recently updated. I think Fiona would put the details to download the booklet in the chat. And each month, a couple of members of the network will present to this event, explaining how and when in the translational journey they can provide support to researchers. All the events are recorded, including the one today, and they can be watched on the YouTube channel, a link of which will be also in the chat in a second. Thank you very much, Fiona. So before we start, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping and Zoom etiquette rules. It would be great if you could keep the camera off and the microphone on mute during the presentation so that we don't disturb our speakers. It would be also great if you can make use of the chat function to ask any question during the presentation. We'll pick them up at the end of both talks, and you'll have an opportunity to ask also questions live. But if you put them in the chat, it's a bit better, so we don't waste any time for the speaker to answer the question. Finally, if you're staying online until the end, it would be great if you could reply to a short Zoom poll that we will launch for feedback. And without further ado, I'd like to move to the first talk of the day. It is my pleasure to introduce Emma and Denise from the Faculty Research Impact team. Emma and Denise will do a double act today, and they will tell us about the Research Impact team. How can they support your translational funding bids, for example, or anything with relation to impact. Emma and Denise, the floor is yours. I'm aware that Denise has got some connection issues, so hopefully that will not affect our talk. But if you don't see Denise's face, that's why. So Emma and Denise, up to you.
Hi, thanks, Alessandro. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you all today. Can you see my slides okay? Great. Okay, so I'm Emma, and I'm here today with my colleague Denise to introduce ourselves as the FBMH Impact team. Hopefully we already know some of you on the call. We're actually 2/3 of the team, as you can see, along with our colleague Deb Bentley, whose lovely face is there for you. And she's also on the call today. So firstly, I'll clarify what we mean by research impact, because it might not be a familiar term to all of you. And then I'll let you know who cares about research impact. And then Denise will hopefully go through some of the practical ways to plan for research impact and how you can evidence research impact. Okay, there are various specialist teams across the university who also support aspects of impact with their expertise. And we're happy to signpost you to the various teams if you're unsure who to approach. So I won't go through this in detail because you'll be very familiar with many of these teams, I'm sure. But just briefly, we've got the cultural partners. There are comms and marketing teams, both within the faculty and centrally. Translation Manchester's on there, of course, and Health Innovation Manchester, which links the university to the trusts. We've got the Innovation Factory, which supports patent spin-outs and licensing, and the Masood Enterprise Centre, which is for entrepreneurial activity. And then finally, to complete this circle, we've got the patient and public involvement, social responsibility and engagement, and the Policy at Manchester platform, which supports researchers with policy work. So what is research impact? Well, it's about making a difference in its simplest form. It's the change that has resulted from your research. So our University of Manchester research moves out beyond the university and beyond academia to affect positive changes or impacts in the real world. So here are various examples of the different categories where impact could be achieved. We've got production. So an example there could be that they've improved productivity or working practices within a sector. We've got commercial and economic impacts. An example would be the creation of a new spin-out company, which might create new jobs in a local area. Environmental impacts, this could be the development of a new process, for example, one which uses less energy in production. Health and well-being might be the most familiar to most of us on the call today. An example here would be a new drug or therapy or a new diagnostic or medical technology that has improved patient outcomes. A policy impact, that might be a change to the delivery of a public service, for example, through NICE recommendations, or that a new technology is being adopted within the NHS. And then finally, awareness and behaviour. This might mean that public debate has been informed by our research, or people's opinions have changed as a result of being able to make informed decisions. So I'll move on now to look at, aside from those who directly benefit from our research impact, who else cares about it and why is it important? Well, firstly, we'll consider the University of Manchester's perspective. Impact is central to the university's strategic vision to be globally recognised for the benefits we bring to society and the environment. And our progress towards achieving this vision will be assessed by various measures of impacts on society, culture, the economy, and environment, as well as through recognition of innovation. Impact is celebrated annually through the Making a Difference or MAD Awards, and submissions to external impact awards such as the Guardian University and the Times Higher Education Awards are encouraged. So let's look briefly now at the UK's position and the UK government's position and the Research Excellence Framework. So the Research Excellence Framework, most recently REF 2021, that's the UK government's system for assessing the quality of research in higher education institutions. So here are the aims of REF. The first is aim there in simple terms, accountability. It's just meaning that if you're spending the public money, obviously you've got to demonstrate the benefits of that investment to society. And then obviously the second and third aims are important to all universities, including our own. Point 3 is the QR, or quality related funding, which the university receives from the government, and we very much need this to function as a university. So the REF process drives around £1.6 billion worth of public money for research each year. Assessment of impact beyond academia was included for the first time in REF 2014, and in REF 2021 the weighting of impact in the process was 25%, and that was up from 20% of the previous REF. So in simple financial terms, one 4-star REF 2014 impact case was worth around £324,000 to an institution, and in REF 2021 it's estimated that this will be worth over £500,000. So the University of Manchester has now submitted 160 cases in March of this year, and we are waiting for the results, which will be out in April 2022. So finally, the last bit in this section, I'm going to talk about funders and why they want impact. Funders like to see both an immediate benefit and a legacy from their funded research. With translational research, we're probably a little bit further down the line in the journey of impact as opposed to basic research, perhaps. So in translational funding calls, funders are often quite specific about what they want in terms of impact, and so this needs to be addressed in proposals when you're submitting to translational research schemes. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Translation Manchester's pathway, and if we add a few funder schemes over the top of this, then we can look at a few examples of the impact requirements in these schemes. So firstly, I'll look at the MRC Developmental Pathway Funding Scheme, or DPFS. This is a preclinical development and early clinical testing scheme. UKRI's funding finder is useful here because it does give you a lot of detail about the calls, including how the projects will be assessed, as you can see here. So in this one, we can see that they're looking for real impact in terms of improving treatment, reducing disease, or improving quality of life. And then next we've got NIHR and their Invention for Innovations, or I4I awards. So they've got both the Product Development Awards and the Challenge Awards. The Challenge Awards support market-ready innovations. And I haven't listed all the criteria here, but you can see this is the first criteria on both of these awards. And basically they're confirming that the aim is to have an impact on NHS and patients. So we'll quickly have a look at a charity-funded example, the British Heart Foundation. These support technologies specifically benefiting cardiovascular health. And this funding goes right through from proof of concept to being ready for commercial launch. And it's specifically stated here by BHF that they're looking for projects which impact on unmet clinical need. And finally, we've got Innovate UK. And they offer knowledge partnership grants, which are assessed on the potential for economic growth and societal impact. And they also offer SMART grants. And in the last call for these, they wanted ideas leading to new products, processes and services. And they also required clear evidence-based plan to deliver significant economic impact. And we're remembering here, of course, that these are UK government grants. So they're talking there in terms of impact on the UK economy. So if you're completing a research application, please do feel free to contact us with the draft because we can provide feedback on that for you in terms of impact. We're happy to help advise on how to include impact within a proposal. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing that screen and pass over to Denise. Denise, do you want to see how you go with your connection?
Great. Okay. Thanks ever so much. As Emma's alluded to, most funders now require you to consider plans for generating impact at the application stage. So perhaps the next thing we should consider is how to plan to achieve your impact. And there are several approaches. The first one is called the passive approach, where you do your research, you publish your research findings to academic colleagues through the usual routes. And if you're lucky, someone outside academia will find them and apply them for the greater good, somewhat serendipitously. This is what probably tended to happen in the past, but we certainly don't recommend that it's done today. Another approach is the active approach, where you do your research, but then you identify potential partners or beneficiaries and approach them with your research findings to encourage them to take them up and apply them. And again, it's not what we recommend, and it's not really what funding bodies are looking for in an approach to generating impact. The best approach, as you can probably tell by the title, is the proactive approach, where even before you put pen to paper, you identify the potential stakeholders or beneficiaries from your research, engage them from the very beginning, co-design your research with them, involve them in your research proposal, involve them in your research project, and ensure that mutual aims are met by the end of the work. And this is often referred to as co-production. But I think the key message here is to really drive home that we need to start planning for research impact as soon as possible, as soon as you come up with a really good research idea. So we need to think about creating an impact plan and engaging with stakeholders as early as possible. Impact is not something that you can leave to consider halfway through your project or at the end of the project. It needs to be thought of at the very, very beginning. With an impact plan, nobody expects you to follow it to the letter, because you may find that you come across bumps in the road that means you take a different pathway, but we can mitigate for that so that, you know, we get to the impact stage as well as we can, despite the bumps in the road. So it's good to start asking ourselves questions at the very beginning, such as, what is the problem that we're trying to address? And how will your research address this problem? And if you're identifying an unmet need, don't assume that you necessarily know what this need is. If you assume that you know what the need is and you work solely in that direction, ultimately you might find that no one takes up your findings because they haven't addressed a need that they think needs to be met. And so you won't achieve the impact that you were hoping to. So this leads us to the second point. Ask yourself who outside of academia might be involved, such as communities, sectors, organisations, individuals. And if you're not sure about key stakeholders in your area, around the subject, look beyond academic sources to see who's talking about the problem, check the news and social media, and just keep an eye out for who's talking about the area that you're interested in. Ask yourself, how and when could you engage with these non-academic audiences? And there's a number of things that we can go through here, but just very briefly. As we've said, engage your stakeholders as early as possible. Engagement is a two-way process. Read widely and identify your stakeholders, and don't be afraid to speak to senior academics to see if they can put you in touch with colleagues of theirs that may be able to help you with your. So if you think Professor X might be able to point you in the direction of Dr. Y, please contact Professor X and don't be too shy. And get your face and your work known. So we mentioned social media before, so Twitter, LinkedIn, you could build your own website, set up your own blog, attend events related to the work in the field you're interested in, build up your network, and be flexible in your approach and do what works for you. We also need to think about how to track the impact and document the impact that we're having. And we need to evidence the change and or the benefit that's happened as a result of our work. So there's plenty of ways that we can help with that, including, you know, getting testimonials from stakeholders is one excellent way of doing this. And think about the resources that you need to deliver your impact. So most funders will pay for any materials you need, any expertise that you might need to bring in, or any training such as media training that you might need to provide. So put that in your funding proposal. And you've probably heard of this company before, but Fast Track Impact was set up by Mark Reed. He seemed to be an international impact guru. He's a bit sort of like, you either love him or hate him, but he has a wonderful resource on his website on all aspects of impact, including how to plan your impact. So if you get a chance, please have a look at his website. So how to write about impact in your funding application. But we'd like to highlight to you a couple of resources that are already there for you to have a look at. So there's our faculty intranet page on impact with lots of how-to guides, etc. And also there's an impact section in the faculty grant repository. So if you get a chance, please have a look at those websites. And we're adding to them all the time. Just to reiterate what Em said, impact is a change of benefit. It really is, you know, the provable benefit of research in the real world. And it's beyond, it's impact beyond academia. And as a reminder, stakeholder engagement, it's a two-way process. It's not you talking at people, it's you engaging with them from the very beginning in a two-way dialogue. Ask yourself what activities you'll need to carry out to achieve the benefits. So, and be specific. So say what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, and who you're going to involve in order to do it. Don't say what you will do in your application, not what you have done in the past, because fund bodies want to know what you're going to do as a result of them funding you, not what you've been funded to do in the past. Don't confuse activities and impact. So activities being pathways to impact, and impact being the actual benefit or change that's resulted from your work. So for example, if you hold a workshop, that's a pathway to pathway to impact. But if somebody from a company attends that workshop and then uses the technique that you've showcased in the workshop to make a change that creates, for example, new jobs or attracts new investment, that's the impact. And how will you know that you've achieved it? Well, there's lots of ways of measuring the impact that you've created. So for example, if you're holding a public engagement event, state how you'll measure the impact of this. So for example, you could have a little questionnaire pre-event and post-event to get people to fill in to see what difference attending your event has made for them. And as we've said before, funding bodies will include reasonable costs for impact activities such as holding workshops and buying in materials. And you can also align your impact plans with your work plans. So you can create a work plan that includes milestones and timelines for impact as well as for your project work. And very briefly, we need to think about evidencing your impact throughout the project and beyond. And the most common question, as you can imagine, is what should I collect? But it depends on what you want to show. And there's no easy answer to this. There's no one size fits all. So what you need to collect very much depends on what you're trying to show. But in general, you need to collect something to show that there has been a change. And in general, it's good to have a mix of qualitative data, so descriptive information which can often come from interviews or focus groups, etc., and quantitative data, numerical information such as number of people that have attended an event that you've held. So start thinking about how you can show that something has changed and that someone or some organisation has benefited as a result of your work. I'm conscious that time's pressing on, I'm very sorry, so I'll just run through these very quickly. So examples of evidence can include testimonials from stakeholders, it can include evidence of media coverage. So like if you've been in the news on a website, make sure you download a PDF of the relevant pages and make sure they're date stamped so that you've got that as evidence, because as we know, web pages aren't there forever. If you're cited in grey literature, such as reports, again, keep an electronic copy or a hard copy and make sure that they're dated. If you're holding a public engagement event, you can have a survey pre and post event. You can get contact details from people, so just a little registration form for their name, their email address, their phone number, so that you can keep in touch with them if you need to see what the difference has been made to them as a result of attending your event. And we need to bank up evidence as soon as it comes up so we don't lose it, and you can easily record evidence in Pure. Some of you may not use Pure yet, but Deb, Emma and I can advise on the easiest way to use it so that you're quite familiar going in and banking whatever you've got to be able to sort of refer to in the future. And very briefly, here's the three of us in the team. Deb supports biological sciences, Em supports medical sciences, and I'm health sciences, but we can help you with all sorts of areas of impact, and we're here to help. And it's great to be away from the ref bubble that we were in for months and months, well, about a year and a half. So it's great to be able to be proactive again and get out into divisions and schools. And that's it from me. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you both. Thank you. That was a great overview on what the team does, and I think it's particularly useful for early career researchers that are trying to understand how their research can generate impact. So thank you for sharing all that information with us, Denise and Emma. If you have any question for Emma or Denise, please put that in the chat. We'll answer them at the end of the session. But if you can populate that during the talk, that would be great. I have some question actually that I might ask at the end if there is time. But in the meantime, we can move on to our second talk of the day. It is my pleasure to welcome Lynne from the Faculty Research Governance and Ethics team. I hope I got that right. And Lynne will tell us how her team can support researchers undertaking clinical and health-related research in the NHS, particularly when applying for ethical and regulatory approval. Lynne, the audience is all yours if you want to start sharing your screen.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Alessandro. Let me just see if I can click the right buttons.
Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully you can see the slides now.
Perfect.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for, well, Alessandro and Fiona for allowing me to come along and talk about the Faculty Research Governance team. It's something which I enjoy doing. a lot. So I'm just going to give a very quick whistle-stop tour really around some of the guidance and some of the support that we provide to researchers, both within the faculty and across the university. So just getting controls. So so we are a small team that has been set up originally within FBMH, within the faculty, to support a very specific type of research, and that's research which is undertaken in the NHS. The reason why we were set up as a faculty team was because that's where most of the activity and most of the research involving the NHS was being undertaken. But more recently, we've actually aligned and started to join with the university's wider research governance, ethics and integrity team. And as part of that change, we've actually started to support other researchers in the different faculties. So we now work across all faculties in supporting researchers that are undertaking research in the NHS. The move towards closer alignment with the Central Research Governance, Ethics and Integrity team allows us to interact more closely with some of our colleagues who are working on very similar areas. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of the governance and regulatory arrangements and requirements that are in place for the research that we help to support, and also some of the activities that happen within the wider research governance, ethics and integrity team. So for example, a key example really is the work that we do in terms of supporting studies, and the work that our colleagues in the clinical trials team do to support regulated trials of drugs and devices. We work in similar areas, and we cover some of the different regulatory processes, but our focus is slightly different in that we look after different types of studies. There's also overlap in terms of the work being carried out in compliance with the Human Tissue Act and research integrity and misconduct, of course, but we do focus specifically on the support of the studies which are considered to be non-CTIMPs and that are going through NHS REC and HRE approval. HRE is the Health Research Authority. So our focus is on studies that involve human participants, either their individuals themselves or their tissue and their data. And that's the area that we really look at. We have started to increase our involvement with the Data Safe Haven and also the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, which is all related to high-risk data processing and the security arrangements around that, just to add into everything else that we're doing. But I'm not going to focus on that today. I'm really going to just look at the NHS ethics approval process and what we do in that area. Before I move on, I just want to highlight for anyone who's not familiar with research governance sponsorship, which is an aspect of the work that we do. The university acts as a research governance sponsor by taking responsibility for the research that's happening within the NHS. And so wherever the university is taking on that role, and it's in a non-regulated trial, so not a clinical trial of a drug or device, then it will come to our team. So the sponsorship really is that the university's responsibility for those types of studies. So just to give you an idea of the kind of breadth of study types that we are involved with and we have contact with, we cover, as I say, because we cover everything apart from the clinical trials that is undertaken in the NHS, we've got a broad spectrum of study types. The vast majority of studies that come through our team are qualitative studies and qualitative and quantitative methodology studies as well. We do have about a third of the studies that come through are either basic science or they're other clinical trials of a novel intervention. And so we do see through the translation pathway, we do see things that are studies that are coming through which are really focused at the preliminary stages of basic science stages, but all the way through to implementation of an intervention within a clinical setting. So we have to understand the challenges that are in place for all these study types and make sure that we're able to offer support for researchers who are working in slightly different areas. The one thing that all these studies do have in common is that they all work under the UK policy framework for health and social care, and that's the framework that's in place to dictate what we as what the university as research governance sponsor needs to make sure is in place for all of the research that's happening in the NHS, and that really guides what our expectations are in terms of how the studies are conducted and set up. As I say, we only work with studies where the university is responsible and is named as the research governance sponsor. And all of the studies that come through our team, like I say, are applying for NHS ethical approval or approval from the Health Research Authority. So they're the three things that really are common between all of these different study types, although the issues and challenges that each of them encounter are slightly different for the different types. The figures actually and the proportions here are based on applications that we received over the last 2 years. And there was 205 in total. As a general rule of thumb, we tend to have between 350 and 400 sponsored studies active at any one time. So it's a large number of studies, and there's a lot to contend with. But thankfully, we have our processes in place, which means that we can provide the support that's needed to the researchers that are conducting these studies. So just moving on to how we actually do provide that support. I'm going to look at two different aspects really on how we deliver that support. The first is really the guidance that we make available. With that number of studies that are coming through, it's really difficult for us to be able to manage individual queries and really spend that much time with projects to advise on a project by project basis. So we have developed our standard answers, guidance and templates, which we pull together into a faculty research governance pack. And that's available to download from the university's website, and it provides up-to-date guidance on lots of different aspects of what we do. And it really is our central resource for anybody who's going through the process or is setting up a study within the NHS. We also like to be available for research teams, and so we have set up a number of research governance clinics that researchers can book into if they've got any specific queries. We actually trialled a pre-application meeting for quantitative and qualitative studies, and that was the aim of that really was to try and preempt some of the issues that we do see when we get applications coming through to us, and they actually work really well, and we're going to try and extend them to different study types. We also like to be involved with delivering training sessions, and we're involved with the new academic programme, but we also do training sessions for on a divisional basis and sometimes for individual research groups, and we go along and update on the latest guidance that's out there for studies that are undertaking work in the NHS. The other thing that we spend a lot of time doing, but actually is one of the most important thing, and I think the thing that has most impact really is the signposting that we do. One of the issues that we have with studies that are going through these external processes is that it can be really difficult to navigate and to identify just what needs to happen in what order. It can be really confusing, and it can be confusing for teams that are going through the process for the first time, but it can also be confusing for teams that have been through it several times but are having to contend with changes to the processes and the guidance that's out there. So we retain a lot of expertise and experience within the team, and we use that to guide people and to direct them to areas of more specialised resource, or if they need to have a specific query that we're not able to help them with, then we'll obviously signpost to the right team. And actually, when we're considering the university as being sponsor, I mean, it's quite often the case that our team is considered to be the sponsor, but we're not. It's the university, and there's so many different offices and colleagues that are involved in the whole process of sponsorship and making sure that all the arrangements are in place. I've just listed a few here, and these are the teams that we tend to have most contact with on a daily basis, really. So whenever setting up agreements, it goes through contracts team, issues around data, which are very common actually. Data queries tend to be the things that get picked up most, both in terms of the reviews that we carry out, but also externally as well, that the external organisations want to have a lot of reassurance, obviously, about how data is going to be processed. Research IT in the insurance office, again with the research data management service, and about how to share and store data, and sometimes, from it's a case of using third parties, then it may involve the procurement office. So these are the officers and these are the colleagues that are involved with setting up these studies. Many of the research teams will have already had contact, but where they haven't, then these are the our kind colleagues that we refer people to with any specific queries. So that's the guidance that we give in a more general kind of a more general level, and we respond to queries and obviously provide that guidance. On the other side, we also have a number of key processes that we follow, which means that we have specific interactions with research studies as they are being set up and conducted. And I've just used this very, very simplified diagram of a study setup. And of course, it never ever happens like this. But if we just use this example of going from study design to generating the research outputs, I can highlight where we tend to have most interaction with individual projects. So the first thing that the first main contact that we have with an individual project is when researchers have identified that they need to get, they're going to be undertaking the research in the NHS, they need to get NHS ethical approval and/or Health Research Authority approval. And so the protocol has been developed, it's been designed, the application form has been completed, and once it's almost ready to go, it needs to be signed off by the university as sponsor, and it's at that stage that we review the application when it comes in. And that's quite an intensive process for anyone who may have been through it before, but it's purposefully that way because what we want to do at that stage is we want to identify any particular issues. We want to make sure that the research study is aligned with both the HRA requirements, but also the university's requirements in terms of policies. This is another opportunity where we can refer researchers to our colleagues in the different offices if there's any particular issues that may need to be addressed. So it is quite an intensive process, this, but we actually find that the work that's done at this stage saves time at the end. So actually, it does tend to iron out any potential issues rather than finding them out at the last minute. So that's our main contact, and that happens for every study that we sign off. So the last count is probably about an average of 100 and just over 100, 145 applications a year we tend to go through in terms of our sponsorship review and authorisation process. So once we've signed off the application, it gets submitted for regulatory approval. So that's the NHS ethics approval and the Health Research Authority generally. We then need to make sure that everything is in place for the study to start. So we will work with the research teams at that stage just to make sure that anything that was picked up at the sponsor review stage or any outstanding issues that needed to be put in place, for example, contracts, are in place before the study can start. And then we give the formal sponsor green light for that study to start. And once the study started, the contact that we have after that really does depend on the type of study and the input that may be required by the research team and the kind of activity that's going to be taking place for the study. So whilst the study is being conducted, we may receive some amendments to the study if the research team want to make changes. They may be selected for an audit. There are reporting requirements that are in place, and we interact with the teams in order to be able to remind and advise of the reporting requirements for the individual projects. If there are unfortunately any adverse events or any incidents that happen, then the research teams will come to us, and we will obviously work through any of those potential issues and see if there's any corrective or preventative actions that need to be taken in terms of patient safety or the study itself. But that can depend. Some studies we have very little interaction once it's started. Other ones we have quite a lot. We have a number of amendments sometimes that come through for some of those studies. And then the final main part where we have the contact is at the end of the study, and we make sure that all of the issues around closing out studies, such as what's going to happen to the data, have the participants been informed, has the ethics committee been notified that the study's ended, have the sites been notified that the study's ended. At that stage, we go through a number of different requirements that may be in place for that particular study, and we make sure that those things are in place so that then the research team can go forward and either publish or move on to the next phase of their research. And even though I've kind of presented this as this is our key interactions and this is the point we have contact, at each of those stages we do try and guide and offer support at those stages, so that the research teams that are going through the process have as much have as much understanding and basically anything that they need in order to be able to get to the next stage. And that really is our priority, is to try and make the whole process a bit easier, and wherever we can, just provide that advice and that guidance. So in terms of who we are as people, so alongside me is Stacey Bodie, who's the Research Governance Officer, and Vivian Attico, who's the Research Governance Support Officer. We're actually, we have a vacant post that we will be advertising very soon for another Research Governance Support Officer. So, you know, spread the word. We're also available, or we update, you know, on our Twitter and our website with all our latest updates. But really, as I said at the beginning, our Faculty Research Governance Pack is the place where we have most of our resources, and that's where we would direct people to if there was any questions. And our email's there, and we're always open by email, so any questions, then people can just let us know. And that's the end of my report for you.
Thank you, Lynne. That was great. That was a great overview of the process, very useful also for me. We got time for a few questions. If there is anything from the audience, if you can please put them on the chat. In the meantime, maybe I can start asking a quick question to the research impact team, either Emma or Denise. I was wondering, you mentioned those impact cases that you collected as part of REF. Are those accessible to people like ECR to see how impact is generated through research, or even for people like us? Can we read them? Can we have a look at what success look like?
The impact cases that went in this year are still classed as confidential at the moment until the actual results come out in 2022. Although if someone is putting in a specific proposal and, you know, it's very relevant for them to see one of those, then we can share them on a case-by-case basis if that's been approved. The 2014 cases are all on the REF 2014 website.
All right.
They're all on there, and it is quite good actually to have a look back and just see how they're presented. It's quite an interesting to look at, if nothing else. Yeah, but the 2021 ones will be available as soon as the results come out in April next year. In the meantime, we'll just be giving them out on a case-by-case basis if people approach us.
That's great. So maybe we can provide a link to how to search the one from 2014, because I think they might be very useful for people just approaching translational research to, you know, to understand how to generate impact.
Oh, there we go. I think Deb's done that. She's on the ball. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Deb. So that was my question for you. I might have another one, but let's see how we do with time. Oh, there is one from Sarah in the chat. If a joint study with NHS Trust staff, so how do you decide if the university is the sponsor or the trust? So I think this is a question for Lynne. So if the study involves both the university and the trust, how do you decide who the sponsor is?
Thanks. Hi, Sarah. Yeah, it's a question that's raised quite a bit, really. We generally go, so the UK policy framework, we use that as the guide, really, and the UK policy framework outlines that generally the substantive employer of the chief investigator for the study should be the sponsor and should take on the sponsor responsibilities. So we generally use that as a guide. If the chief investigator of a study is university staff or students, then we would go ahead with sponsorship, and we'd be happy to consider that. There may be other circumstances. It's not a hard and fast rule. You know, there may be other circumstances where a trust may be in a better position to take on that role of sponsor. But generally, the substantive employer would be the one that would, you know, would be the one that would take that forward.
That's great. Hopefully that answers Sarah's question. I got one that is actually a follow-up on that question around sponsorships. So my question maybe is very naive, but is there any costs associated with the sponsorship? You know, like if the people are coming to the university asking for sponsorship, do they need to put that into the grant application? And do they need to approach you after or before they have funding? So I apologize if this is very naive, but I think
not at all. It's a great question. For studies that are coming through our team, the faculty research governance team, we don't have any sponsorship costs associated with that. For studies that want University of Manchester sponsorship but are a regulated trial, so a clinical trial of an investigational medicinal product or a medical device, then that goes through the clinical trials team that sits centrally, and they do have sponsorship costs. So depending on the type of study, there may be a sponsorship fee involved, or it needs to be factored into the costing, but not if it's coming through us. So in terms of your second question, it varies really. There's no, because as I said in response to Sarah's question, because there's an expectation that the substantive employer will take on the role of sponsor, then for pretty much for all the types of research that would come within scope of our team, if researchers need us to confirm sponsorship in advance, so for the funding application, then by all means we will provide that. That's no problem. But there's no requirement to come to us in order to get that done before the funding application is submitted. We need to see the applications before they're submitted for the regulatory approvals, because we need to authorise that. But again, if a research team is concerned that there may be some potential issues and we want to have that assurance before they submit the funding application, absolutely fine, we're happy to consider them.
Fantastic, thank you, Lynne. I think we are running a little bit out of time because we're supposed to finish up Q2. So if there is no further question in the chat, I'd like to draw this event to a close. I'd like to thank all the speakers. I do have to ask you a little bit more of your time to answer this poll that I will launch just now. So if you could complete that before leaving, that would be great. Should be onto your screen right now, hopefully, if that's worked. And I just want to remind you that we're going to have another event next month. So if you are subscribed to the Translation Manchester newsletter, you should get details very soon, probably next week. Also, keep an eye on the announcements, and this will be late in October. Another important date to put in your calendar, if you've not done so already, is our Translation Manchester symposium event, which will be in December. So there will be the 8th and 9th of December. It's going to be a 2-day event, which is partly online and partly face-to-face. So it'll be great to see you all in a lunch and poster session and in an evening reception. Details of this will be circulated in due course. So I will just leave the poll open a little bit longer if you want to answer the question, which would be great. Otherwise, thank you again to all the speakers that have been talking today. This will be posted on YouTube in the next week or so, so you can keep looking back at it, and see you all next month. Thank you very much.